we have an allotted time, so I just want to like dive right in, right? And I think the appropriate place to start is probably the consumer, right? Arguably the most important part of all of this. And it's interesting because now I think we can debate back and forth on, is the customer always right? But I think most of us would agree that the customer always decides, right? And now more than ever, they not only want a quality product, right, but want to know if the company they're supporting is making a positive societal impact, for example, right? So my question to you, gentlemen, is how do you meet the high demands of customers today? Because they're not just customers, right? They're stakeholders and everything else.
Yeah, I think speaking from the Jets' perspective and NFL perspective, the advent of personal seat licenses completely raised the bar. So our fans now are so much more engaged. Their expectation levels are so much higher. The advent of the instant communication of social media, right? We get feedback constantly, 24/7, 365. So at a game, if someone has, a cold hot dog, we hear about it, right? It's that granular. So the bar has been raised, and our business has shifted so that, yeah, we are in the customer relation business, like first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a brand holder, any brand, I mean, you have to be sensitive and sort of we do a lot of listening. There's no way to sort of meet every complaint on demand immediately, but certainly it's something that, as a brand holder, we have to, just be tracking and seeing what's happening. And certainly, even how we work with our licensees and how we sort of build our contracts, we have to look at and take all of those factors in place in terms of the types of deals that we do as well.
You're right, Eric. It does. It starts with the fan. And I think over the past couple of years, there's been a tremendous transition in what we're seeing in fandom when you talk about Gen X and Gen Y and Gen Z coming into the fold. And we like to say, at the NHL that it's an immersive fan that has really come into play. You have your avids and you have your casuals, but now the way the fan is acting, the casuals can be just as avid as your avid fans, but they're consuming your sport maybe in a different way. They may not be buying season tickets and watching a 2.5-hour game on television and doing those linear things that we've been used to. But what they are doing is they're creating their own content, and they're amplifying their own content. So in many ways, you have to make sure that you're serving that, because if you're not serving that, they're going to go out and do that and have that message in the market place anyway. So fans have really transitioned from not only being consumers, when you're looking at the consumer products business, but influencers themselves. And then in that conversation, they're creators. And so now there's this creator culture that is occurring, with fandom that I think, we all have to be mindful of when we sort of look at this transition now to the immersive fan.
Yeah, because you guys have been doing this for a while. So I'm just curious, how much pressure is there now to be more intentional than ever and actually standing for something beyond just a cool product, right? Going a little bit deeper.
So I think there's this natural tension working in sports, right? So obviously the athletes in all of the major sports, they're elite. They strive for greatness each and every day they walk in the building. It's hard, it's almost impossible on the business side not to get swept away in that. And there's such a feeling of, walking into the building every day and saying to yourself, what's my grade going to be today, right? I'm going to get a report card at the end of the day. And, those fans are stakeholders, whether they're suite holders, season ticket holders, single game buyers, or folks who don't come to a game because they live halfway around the world in Australia, but they run a New York Jets fan club there, right? So they're engaged with all of our social content and every platform imaginable. Again, they are the ones that we're trying to serve and interact with. And I think as we went through the pandemic, one thing that was readily apparent was it was an opportunity for us all to be a little more mindful and then reevaluate how we're engaging those fans.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of just goes back to just being really sensitive to their needs. As an IP holder, representing the players, we get a lot of feedback from our own membership. We don't necessarily tap into their own individual communities, but we certainly listen to what they have to say and, how certain products might negatively impact them because, we're really sensitive in terms of, how does this position our players? So it's really just being really mindful. I mean, there's no way to just police everything and just react so quickly, but our licensees, many of them just understand the business of basketball really well. And that is one of the, sort of ways in which we do weed out partners is by finding partners that just really understand the sport and understand what the consumer needs are and what their wants are, to help at least say, all right, we've justified the reason for doing this. You might not have liked it, but here was our rationale, right? So it's backed up. And then from there, we have to adjust, right? If something's not working, you just can't keep going down the same path, doing the same old thing. You do have to adjust and you do have to listen.
Yeah, I agree with Josh, and he used the word community, and I think that's really, really important when we start to talk about, this creator culture and this immersive, fan shift is this idea of the community, and there a lot of that conversation starts with the values, and we heard this a little in in the last session, but that is a much more important starting point than ever before in terms of tucking values into that marketing mix equation when you're thinking about when we're thinking about our fans. And so diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability, these are all part of the community conversation in a big way, and they do connect when you start to connect the dots to our intentional service of those fans, and then ultimately the products at the end of the day. For the National Hockey League, we have a great partner in Adidas, and in listening to that fan community talk about sustainability, we came out with a product where all of our uniforms that are worn on the ice and sold, so our authentic uniforms, are sustainable, made with no virgin plastics. So the NHL Prime Green Adidas uniform, we're the first league to be able to do such. And what I can tell you is that came from not whiteboarding, hey, how do we come up with a great product idea to go out and sell fans? It came by listening to the fans and what was important to them in terms of the values, and then the shared values between the National Hockey League and Adidas. So when we were whiteboarding with Adidas, we were talking about our values, and then at the end of the day, we end up, landing on a prime green jersey. I think another example is Fanatics and how they've looked at this intentional service of the customer, and the way that they do it very, very well is they're looking at what you would call social listening. So what are these little digital cues, these little digital footprints, the conversations that are on social media? What are your fans clicking on? What intentional moves are they making, and what are their little communities talking about? And then Fanatics is very, very good at saying, okay, let's take those digital footprints and let's take those digital cues and put them into the planning process of the products that we're offering, when we're offering them, how we're offering them, and what we're offering them.
I love the shameless plug, sustainability plug on the NHL. For those who don't know, Think 450 is sort of the innovative engine, if you will, for the NBPA, and Josh and his team are pretty pivotal in getting NBA Top Shot off the ground. And I kind of want to just dive into NFT for a second. And anytime you bring up the acronym, right, I'm seeing all the faces, right? You get a different one for every time you bring it up. So I wanted to ask you, gentlemen, are NFTs just here to stay long term, or is this a sexy product in the moment, this moment in time?
I mean, obviously, we believe it's here to stay. We entered the space in 2018. with our first partnership with Dapper Labs, the league was obviously a part of that as well. We could have gone in a lot of different directions. I think what we liked about them was they were going to offer something unique and something different and something also just sort of accessible using a credit card. Because back in 2017, 2018, the thought of buying crypto for most people and setting up a wallet was just really overwhelming. I got halfway through the process and I was like, I don't want to deal with this. But they sort of said, hey, we're obviously going to meet the needs of the crypto heads, but we also want to, make something very accessible. And in terms of what they ended up developing and how that came to be, while we were excited and we were optimistic, there's no way that we could have sort of ever believed that it was going to be what it became today. And obviously now, NFTs, certainly across licensing, is a ubiquitous term that everyone is sort of, all brand holders and all sort of folks in the licensing space across apparel and hard goods, everyone's looking at how do they tap into NFTs or at a minimum utilize blockchain technology. It's a space that we really strongly, passionately believe in. We, us as well as the league, we're sort of at the forefront, which we're immensely proud of in terms of just being able to talk to our members who as well are very enthusiastic. I've been with the PA and Think 450 now for almost 5 years. And during that time, I maybe received 10 calls from players asking about something product related. I probably, in the last year, have received over 100 just on NFTs alone. So it's one of those products that also, while it's just really innovative and different, it also sort of taps into what our players are about, which is innovation.
Yeah, I think relative to the blockchain, certainly from an NFL perspective, a Jets perspective, we're all testing and learning. So there are multiple tentacles to blockchain, right? So what's the best use of that technology to service and reach our fans? And those answers may be different across different league platforms. They may be different across 32 clubs in a league. So we're taking the approach of, okay, let's test different areas. Let's see how this goes. What our fans are ultimately the ones who are going to decide, right? So we're looking at it from a very inquisitive viewpoint, I would say. And it's clearly very, very new. And we're trying to figure out what's the best use of it. How do we best monetize it? Can we monetize it locally? Are we monetizing it and there's a revenue share component? Those things are all the plane is literally being built as we're flying it.
Similarly, the NHL has really prioritized, this business opportunity. And, for us, it's in its infancy, and so a lot of analysis kind of going on in this space. And we put a task force in place led by David Lahansky that is really helping us, pull this apart. And for us, we want to take a very, very strategic approach to the space because for us, it's really about the relationship with our fans and enhancing the relationship with our fans. So it's not necessarily just a transactional type of strategy. For us, it's a fan development strategy and a fan engagement strategy. So more to come.
If I could just add, their approach is right. We got the advantage of being first to market, really first to actually make an impact. There were others that put their IP out there, and I think from our perspective, at least on the Think 450 side, and maybe the league felt the same way, it was like, hey, we know what we know right now. This is going to evolve. Let's try and put as much parameters and guidelines around it, but this is something that, these things live in perpetuity. And how do we sort of live with a product that's going to live in perpetuity? And those are honestly some of the things that we're just sort of figuring out now as we're looking at other opportunities across the board. But certainly, we had the advantage of being first. There was some risk associated with that. We took that risk. It's working out for us. But naturally, I think for IP holders as a whole, you do have to be thoughtful about sort of, what you're going to do with NFTs and how you're going to utilize blockchain. I mean, right now there is this collectability aspect, which is important, but obviously the next waves are going to be the utility in terms of gaming, and then you have the experiential components as well that, will resonate with everyone else's businesses, but you do have to do the testing. And now there's a lot of data out there for you guys to take a look at so that you can get comfortable. You can put in, whatever protections you need to put in. I mean, we're kind of having to deal with all of that right now, and it's worked out, but it's complicated for sure.
I love that too, Chris. The plane is being, built as you're flying it for sure. And I kind of just want to stay on emerging categories right now because, as we know, there's so many avenues, right? Metaverse, blockchain, NFT. I mean, you can run the whole gamut, right? So what growth areas are you guys just seeing, right? As this influx of new technology and media platforms are coming in?
I mean, we're still like phase 2 of the NFT space right now. But look, I mean, obviously our gaming business is thriving. We're constantly looking at new gaming opportunities. We're also talking to our biggest partners in terms of how they can innovate and what they're going to add on. And obviously they're looking at blockchain and NFTs. I think growth for us is also looking at some of the non-traditional spaces, that are just interesting to our players as well. I mean, I don't want to sit here and suggest that it's going to be a huge revenue windfall, but we're looking at categories that we had never ventured into before and things that are interesting to our players, like wine. Like everyone knows NBA players are into wine, and we have a wine partnership, and we're developing wine and telling a story around our players and wine and how that makes sense. And then also in a lot of the other the players associations as well as leagues have looked at equity opportunities. That's one of the areas that we see as growth. Now, not every opportunity is going to pan out, but certainly you do have to make some investments, and we're looking at those investments, and that's really where we see our growth coming from.
I think one of the areas that we're seeing growth in too is, for example, in the licensing space, trying to get the licensees to adopt RFID ticketing, right? That everything we can do for in-venue experiences to improve that experience, right? It is critical. Professional sports is in the live events business. So as good as the home experience is, right? And we've all been there where you're looking out the window, you're looking at the weather forecast. I don't know, should I go? I have the tickets. we need to encourage you to get there, right? And how do we do that? Well, if there are points of friction, how do we eliminate those points of friction, whether it's ingress, whether it's when you transact with us? That's really, really hypercritical, right? And we're seeing it in other aspects of our lives. You duck into Amazon Go and, just walk out, right? That technology, that can be a game changer. The more we can do to improve your experience, right, and give you perhaps even some exclusive content experiences that you can't necessarily get with the home viewing experience, that's where we're really trying to put a lot of energy.
Licensed products and we feel bullish certainly on the NHL it's poised for growth right now. So consumers are really adopting to digital. That is propelling growth, and the industry has really caught up in many ways with key trends that are going on in the marketplace. There's this huge trend in athleisure that's going on, in this idea of collabs and working with artists and working with athletes, and again, listening to consumers through social media, and then bringing products together, and to be very strategic and intentional about how you bring those products to market. So what the synchronization of that go-to-market, strategy is at the end of the day, and a little of the page that I think the consumer products folks at the leagues are taking is this idea of shoe drops and capsules and these specialty things that you bring to market. You have a significant story behind that. You put some social media wind at the back. You amplify it through those consumers who are, again, creating content and amplifying content, and then look to sell through that product. That's a significant trend that is going on in the marketplace right now. for the National Hockey League, two good examples of that. One, most recently, is the Toronto Maple Leafs launched an alt jersey that was a collab with Justin Bieber. And so this is a reversible jersey, Leafs logo and alt treatments on the front, and then it reverses to Justin Bieber's charity affiliation with Drew House. And again, you throw some social media wind at it, and in Justin's case, it's 350 million followers, and then all of a sudden you really have a crescendo there, and you're part of a very big conversation. And then a bigger platform example has been the Adidas Reverse Retro platform that we brought to market a season ago. And there we took a capsule and turned it into a franchise and said, how can we take a capsule and a shoe drop strategy to all 32 member clubs and create some scarcity with it? Again, some storytelling and some noise and some social media wind at the back. And with that, you create some real, in engagement. So I think you'll see those trends continue to grow.
And Eric, just to echo something Jim said, right? There's the two things that Jim's talking about. There's an authenticity, right? It's got to be authentic, and our fans, they're shrewd enough. The authenticity in the two examples he cited, that's what makes it work, and that's why in the collaboration space, you have to be really authentic.
I know Jets fans too. You can't BS them, so you got.
No, they're very passionate with their feedback, and I appreciate them.
I kind of want to talk about like the licensing shift a little bit, and it's interesting because I think the business, as we know, merch agreements are typically made, right? Manufacturers and sports teams and leagues between them, and it seems like there's a limited group of companies right now, and it's kind of tough to break in. So do you imagine looking forward more companies breaking in, or do you expect sort of the household names, Fanatics and others, getting a greater stronghold on the industry?
I mean, there's always new companies coming in. It's just what impact do they have? It's a mature business, but it's certainly ripe for new opportunities. We were talking the other day about more diverse companies, and certainly in the panel before, that's an important initiative that I think all rights holders are looking at in terms of how do we create more diversity amongst our vendors and our licensees. But it's tough. I mean, getting in and sort of, I've never worked for a licensee, but I know the difficulties of trying to get retail shelf space. Obviously now there's new opportunities with e-commerce and everything like that, but it's tough in terms of, making that impression and really being able to get your product and be adopted in a meaningful way, also to then maintain your business. It's difficult, but you do see a lot of vendors coming in. I mean, every year we look at, I don't know, it could be a dozen new companies that we had never even heard of before. Now, it's not to suggest we grant our rights to all of them, but certainly it's really interesting to see, new partners coming in. And it's interesting, like even in the apparel space, which is one of the most mature product categories there's always new partners coming into the space. It's just a matter of, how they break through or how big they break through.
I don't want to say it's like Shark Tank, but for the potential licensees, it's what's your value proposition, right? And so many times young people will ask the question of us, how do I break into sports? It's so difficult. I applied for a job and I never heard back. And my answer is always the same. It's, listen, you didn't hear back, you can turn and walk away. Or do you choose to dig in because this is something you really want? Right? And that I would say that to any potential licensee. If you believe in your value proposition and what you can add to the leagues, well, then keep going, right? That's really, really important.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And definitely new manufacturers will be breaking into this business. And it's the ones who are looking at all the key trends that are occurring, in the marketplace. And so if you're putting omni first, and omni isn't just, how do I connect my brick and mortar to my e-commerce, No, omni is thinking about digital in your supply chain, in your messaging to your consumers, in all aspects of bringing products to market. So if you're putting omni first, if you're putting storytelling first, if you're putting premium and quality product first, if you're saying, well, I'm going to have my own website to be able to transact with consumers and then create these communities and these followings behind my brands, they're absolutely going to break into the industry. And I couldn't agree, with Chris more on this idea of values and putting values sort of at the center of this. And the companies that, brands matter. And brands in many ways, they are stories. And they are promises to meet or exceed the expectations of your consumer. And the companies that are thinking like that, they're the ones that absolutely, can be, successful in this. I think Wear by Erin Andrews is a great example of that. So, Erin and her team, they checked all those boxes. They wanted to make great product. They wanted it to be premium. They wanted it to be omni. She was going to use her own social media and her influencer status to put some wind behind it. But at the end of the day, that wanted the product to be great. And therefore they did. They broke into the industry and have had tremendous success.
I got one more before we go, and you three represent and work with the major leagues, right? The big boys. So you mentioned Shark Tank and before, but what advice would you just give to a newer brand trying to not just get in the door, but make an impact, right? And with stiff competition.
I think it's having a point of view, right? And being true to that point of view. So we've seen it even in a mature business like the NFL. With the introduction of new licensees, I mean, Jim talked about Wear. There are other ones that kind of, have drafted off of that success that we've introduced and have been successful, right? Our fans, they're clamoring for that newness. And it's not to say that, the well-established brands, don't have a place. Of course they do. But there's this newness, right, that people are responding to. So my advice to those brands would be true to yourself, right, and be persistent, right, and just be very top of mind with this is our value proposition. This is how we can help your business. Because at the end of the day, we're all in the business of trying to grow our business. And it's a mature business, but there are still growth opportunities.
This could be a lot of fun. I'm a lifelong Jets fan, Shea Stadium, Richard Todd, Johnny Lamb Jones. We can talk about what Jets fans are clamoring for.
Listen, my first game was at Shea. We used to sell glass beer bottles back in the 70s.